Hello, I'm Dr. Paul, and this is my beautiful wife, Lynn. And today we are going to talk about one of the very powerful concepts that go along with plasma energy, and that is the power of intention. And Lynn will give a little introduction on the power of intention.
Well, part of the power of intention was very well explained years ago by the scientist Masaru Emoto. And I'm just going to hold up a book that he had. And if any of you have not heard of him before, what he did was to take many jars of water and put intention of what that water contained and leave it. He froze it overnight and looked at it under the microscope the next day. And these are some of the things that came out of the intention that he had put on the jars of water. So you had love and peace and things like that. But then when he got to the intention that might have been negative intentions, instead of being very beautiful, organized crystals, they ended up just being very dark blobs. So that's one example of intention. Now there's an important book that we read years ago about intention, and that was written by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he did a lot of writing, a lot of lecturing. And Paul, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
This is that book Lynn was speaking of, The Power of Intention by Wayne Dyer. And he was a very popular motivational speaker, and he has since died. But in this book, he gives many examples of how the power of intention worked for people. So this is a book that I would recommend for anybody who would like to learn more about intention, or if you have that nagging feeling that it's not really a valid concept, then you should read this book and get a whole new insight on that phenomenon.
Well, and some of the things with intention, we've put quite a bit on our website about intention because it is such an important aspect of what we do with plasma energy waters. And there's a whole segment on Neville Goddard, who was a very popular and one of the early speakers on intention on television. And that was mostly during the 50s, the late 60s. And this was out in California. And he wrote and spoke a lot on intention. There's a great story that he tells, and he's talking about how he was learning intention. And he had left his family behind in Barbados and was doing various things in New York City. I believe he was a dancer, a dance instructor, and probably a variety of other jobs just to make ends meet. He had not been to see his family for, I believe, 12 years, and he had someone he studied with who was from Ethiopia. And so he mentioned that he really wanted to go see his family, and so his instructor said, well, you are in Barbados with your family. Now, what his instructor did was he set the intention that Neville was already there. And so Neville would come back and stew and carry on, well, I just am not getting this to work and this and that. And he kept working with it. Well, one day he gets a letter from his brother, and it is a ticket to board a ship and come to Barbados for the holidays. And So when he called the ship company, they said, well, we're sorry, but we can only put you in steerage for part of the way, and then we'll move you to first class. And when he went to his instructor, he stomped out of the room and said, I did not intend for you to be anywhere but in first class, and slammed the door. Well, as it turned out, Neville got on the ship. As he's boarding the ship, they said, oh, by the way, someone had to cancel the trip and you will be in first class all the way. So that was just a very neat story of how that whole use of intention came to be. And I think back to a time when we decided we were going to make a change in our lives, and so Paul decided we're going to sell the first practice that he had developed in our hometown. Well, a buyer did come along, and it was our intention. Everything's going to work out fine. We had a win-win transaction for everybody concerned, and we thought we had a buyer for our house. Well, that buyer backed out at the closing table, and we're already on our way to the next place that we're going to live, and we've got a commitment on a house where we're going. But our intention was strong, and it was just like, well, it's all going to work out. Out of the blue, we got a phone call from a guy who said, I understand you have a house for sale out on such and such road. And within a week of that phone call, the house was sold, the deal was done, we were packed, and we had moved. So again, the intention was very strong, and sometimes with intention, we don't need to get too bogged down in the details. Put your intention out there and let that arrive. And a good example for that recently is our oldest son, and his intention was to leave the job that he had and the situation that surrounded that job, and he said, I'm really well qualified to go in and manage a vacation type of ranch. He had lived off the grid. He knew how to take care of the well system, the pumps. He's an electrician. He had a solar system. He had wind power. And he said, I know that job is there waiting for me. He ended up walking into an office in the nearby city, meeting with somebody, and they just happened to have a position. And so within a very short time, his intention was met of the lifestyle change he was after. And then they decided, well, maybe they'd go ahead and sell their house. Well, an off-the-grid house is a pretty unusual property, and you're either going to have a quick buyer or it could sit there a while. Strong intention. His house sold within 3 days. So those are just a few of the aspects of intention. And Paul, I think you spoke about intention when we were talking about this, about going to vet school.
Yeah. Intention is something that is not, it's not taught by our schools, our religions, our institutions. In fact, it's demeaned and belittled by many who are in authority. And in my example, I had gone to college right out of high school. And I was not ready to go to college because I was not ready to settle down. I came from a small town in the New Mexico mountains and had never been exposed to the social elements that were outside of a small town. Well, when I got to college in a city, one of the first things I discovered was the abundance of girls. And I was totally distracted. I went 2 years of college. All I did was party. I ended up with 2 full years of a 1.4 grade point average, which is poor, real poor. So I dropped out of college and went to work. I soon got drafted. I was drafted into the Army in 1962. And after I spent 2 years active duty and 2 years reserve, I had the GI Bill, and that's when I met my wife. We got married, and I started college. She had just graduated, had a teaching degree, and she went to work teaching school, and I went to work studying. In order to go to veterinary school, which was my intention from the beginning, I needed to have a 3.8 or better grade point average. Now, when you got 2 years of 1.4, that's pretty hard to work through and bring the whole average up to 3.8. So in order to impress the admissions group at Colorado State University Veterinary School, I took 21 hours of chemistry my first year and got all A's. I did the same thing for 2 years, got all A's. That was enough to impress the administration at Colorado State to admit me into veterinary school, which was my intention from the beginning. Now, I couldn't have done it without the constant motivation of that intention and the dedication to that intention. So the power of intention, in my instance, is very strong. Also, there's many incidences you could cite that prove the power of intention. Another one is physicists who have done experiments with light and light particles can change the results of the experiment with their thoughts. Now, this has been proven. This is not baloney. Just by their intention, they can direct the light particles in their experiments. Now, this is, there's a lot of deep theory there that I won't go into, but it's a incidence that proves on a, I guess you could call it a microscopic level, the power of intention is very, very strong. And to say again about Wayne Dyer's book, anybody who is curious about this phenomenon should get that book and take a good hard look at it, because there's a lot of information there, and coming from the background where I did, being raised as a Catholic and with strict ideas about religion and our limitations as humans, and that we must depend on a higher power for our well-being, it was real hard for me to adapt to these concepts. But it's the conditioning that we have by our institutions, schools, and religions that keep us from using the power of intention. And why don't they want us to know about it? Well, in my opinion, it's just like everything else. We're a lot harder to control if we know that we can form our own destiny, and we don't have to depend on the higher powers of government and institutions.
Well, I'll mention one brief thing that happened with intention. Paul was on hemodialysis for 8 years, which is a very long time to be on hemodialysis. 8 months is a long time. And he was also on a transplant list. And at one point, they had finally reached a stage where they said, all the accesses in your arms have now failed, and we're going to have to use your leg for the next access for when we run the dialysis and insert the needles to run the fluids and everything. And he just said to me before the holidays, there's going to come a day when I am not going to do this any longer. Now, I think I had a pretty good idea where he was headed with that. So, well, we'll talk about it later. In January, 2 weeks into January, he got a call. He was a backup for a kidney transplant. Another 10 days later, he got another call, and he got a kidney transplant. So again, there was that intention, and maybe there was a certain element mixed in with it of, buddy, you're not done yet. You're going to have to stick around a little longer. So, and there's another good author on intention is Slim Sperling, and he did a lot of work on radionics and how we can affect our surroundings. And an example he gives is he was studying the radionics and the intention that goes with it, and he's out working his fields one day, and the weather report had been there's going to be a huge storm, and so every time he drove the tractor one direction, he would say to where the storm would be coming in. His intention was that storm would not affect the tassels on his cornfield. And later that day, when he was all done with the cornfield, the weather report was, that storm never materialized. So it just gave him pause to think, where was intention in all of that? He had a strong intention. I prefer not to have my crop ruined by this storm that's predicted. So that's another example, but you use intention a lot in what you're doing with the plasma energy.
Yes, every time we work with the plasma energy or make up plasma vials or whatever we send out, we always put the intention with it that it's going to do the job that it was made for. And we send that intention along with that product. And so far we have had excellent results with people we have sent our products to with their getting results. And we always stress to them also to put their own intention on it. So it definitely does have an effect. And when you're working with plasma energy or anything else, don't forget to use the power of intention. Now, the power of intention is not the same thing as prayer. With prayer, in my understanding anyway, is that you are asking a higher power to perform a certain thing for you. With the power of intention, you are putting the intention out to the universe that you are going to be able to do that yourself. So that's my understanding of it. And for me, it's a very powerful concept and it works.
We had a discussion one day, and it was, what can two people do? When you kind of look out at the world, sometimes it looks like a pretty big mess. And so we got to thinking about all the drops of water that have left our place and all the places that they've gone inside our country, but also around the world. And so then in talking about intention, we're saying, well, all those drops of water carry our intention with them. So we wrote something up, and I will finish with this, and this is our intention and invitation. All plasma energy that originated from Lynn and Paul's efforts joins every other bit of plasma energy that originated from Lynn and Paul's efforts, wherever that plasma energy is in the world. On the land, in the waters of the rivers, lakes and oceans, in the air, and in the clouds above. All that plasma energy brings Lynn and Paul's intention everywhere on, above, around, and below the surface of planet Earth, that all living things are filled with love, peace, joy, freedom, and well-being, with the ethics and morality to support the love, peace, joy, freedom, and well-being of all living beings on planet Earth, including the living being, our home, planet Earth. All of like intention are invited to join this intention. So we want to thank you for watching our video today. When you go to our website, plasmaenergysolution.com, you will find a whole section there on intention and a blog that I wrote some time ago that's still available about intention. And Paul, what would you like to add?
That's about it, really. I just want to thank you for taking time to watch this video. And if you think you've gotten any value at all from it, give us a thumbs up and like it. Share it with your friends. And if you have questions or comments, put them in the comment section down below this video. And if there are any questions, we will do our best to answer them on subsequent videos. Thank you very much.